All right, ladies and gentlemen, version 2.2 has arrived. It's been here for a couple of days, and of course, with it, we have a rerun banner. And today, Camellya is going to be our focus. She's running alongside Camellya along with her own limited weapon, Red Spring, and I wanted to do a bit of an analysis to see what her pull value really is at this present point in the game, knowing all of the different options that we have, all of the different units on the roster, the new synergies that have emerged since Camellya's release back in version 1.4, and whether or not she is worth the pulls depending on the state of your account. And so I have had this unit for a pretty long time. I have her at S0R1, and what I wanted to do today was go through some tests, test her out on a couple of weapons, talk about her Sonata sets, her synergies with various units on the roster, and determine how valuable she's going to be depending on where the state of your account is. Let's just go ahead and dive through a little bit about her mechanics, talk a little bit about some of her features, and where some of her big synergies are. So kind of like starting off with Camellya's abilities, one thing in particular that you have to keep in mind is that Camellya is a basic attack focused unit. She is a unit that basically, with her skill, that's when she enters the Blossom mode, that is all going to do basic attacks. Her normal attacks as well, obviously scale with basic attack, pretty much every single one, and they do deal a lot of damage. She basically has two forms when you go across her gameplay. Her single target mode, where she'll track enemies, and it's very good for bossing, and then she'll have a different form, where she'll have the red hair, and then do these spinning AoE attacks. This is really good for AoE stages, like, let's just say, something like Whimpering Wastes. And so most of the time, if I were to clearly differentiate the game modes, you would rather use this white-haired form in the TOA, and then you want to use this red-haired form when you're in Whimpering Wastes. So that's kind of like the differentiation between the two. And so as a result, you do want to end up maxing out both of these abilities. They deal a lot of damage, and she basically has two different forms that you use for two different game modes. The end result is that Camellya is very, very, very high tier in both of the end games, and that makes her one of the higher value units in the game. She comes along with a unique mechanic on her Forte circuit where she essentially will build up a separate resource called her Crimson Pistols. And when she basically has a lot of Crimson Pistols, consuming 10 of them, right, and then getting 10 Crimson Buds, the idea is that she'll activate a special move called Ephemeral that deals a lot of damage. You don't have to take my word for it. Ephemeral is that enhanced move that she does, her enhanced resonance skill, and it deals a shit ton of damage, right? In a huge AoE. And the only issue with it is that it can sort of be easily interrupted and cause some issues down the road. But we'll see some of the ways that you can solve that in the gameplay later on. The idea is that after she uses Ephemeral, she enters the budding state, which gives her a big buff to her outgoing damage. You can see over here, a damage multiplier of 50% that can be added to another 50% depending on the number of Crimson Pistols that she consumes before she enters the budding state. And what that means is that you basically have a playstyle with this unit where you enter the field, you start attacking, you consume all your Crimson Pistols, and then you generate your buds. And then you cast Ephemeral after you've been on the field for a long time, or really not a long time. After you've been on the field for a while, you've consumed all those pistols, do a big nuke, and then gain up to a 100% outgoing damage buff. And what that means is this character has a lot of field time. She has a lot of complexity built into her kit, depending on how fast you're able to consume those pistols. And the end result is that she does a lot of damage with a lot of field time. Her Resonance Liberation is probably the most simple move in her kit. And all this is a big nuke of about 1.2k in a similarly large area like Ephemeral. And it puts you on the ground, which is pretty much the other interesting thing about this move. It also consumes a fair amount of resonance energy at 125, but gives you a lot of Concerto. And one of the important things about Concerto with this unit is that Ephemeral is activated when Camellya has a full Concerto bar and she's able to consume it. And so what that means is that having this liberation every single rotation is very important to be able to activate Ephemeral every single rotation as quickly as possible. And once you go ahead and you consume your first Concerto bar by going into Ephemeral, you'll be able to build up a second one where she consumes more pistols in Ephemeral or in the budding mode and then generates more and more of that Concerto so that she can use a buffed outro skill at the end of her entire rotation. She has one outro skill that deals not that much damage, but she has a second one that deals a lot more, assuming that she's already gone through her entire rotation and, you know, built up that first bar, consumed it, and then is building up the second one. So that's basically Camellia's kit at a baseline. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the advanced things and some of the advanced mechanics when it comes to this character. And the best place to do that is, of course, going to be in the Tower of Adversity. So with that, I would say the TOA is pretty much the simplest way that you can use this unit. We're going to go ahead and demo her off on the right side. The team that we're going to be using here is a very, very simple one. It's going to be Camellya alongside Shorekeeper alongside Sanhua. And the main thing to keep in mind is that Camellya is a character that really, really wants as many crit rate buffs as possible in her team. That's why we're pairing her with Shorekeeper, who's able to provide that 12.5% bonus to crit rate and then a 25% bonus to critical damage. The reason why Camellya wants all this crit is because she only has crit damage nodes in the sides of her skill tree. What this means is that even with a full build, right, with Camellya on Havoc Eclipse and all of these all of these amazing substats over here, you're seeing a bunch of crit rate, double crit on everything. She hasn't even broken 70%. And when we're seeing these very big motion values over here of 1.26k and 1.2k, well, we want to make sure we're critting as much as possible on those single instances of damage. And so I'm really only able to reach around 80% crit rate with a fully built Shorekeeper. And the end result, guys, is that this character can have a lot of consistency problems unless you have this unit on the team. The sacrifice that you can make is to actually run this unit on, let's just say, something like a crit rate echo. You could consider doing that, but you're not going to get close to her full damage potential if this is something that you're doing. So that's the team that we're going to be running with. Let's talk a little bit about some of her combat mechanics. So the important thing to realize is her big interaction with intro skills. So you're just seeing over here, I'm generating some Concerto on my Sanhua. I'm going to go ahead, max it out, and then go over to Camellya. You're going to notice I now have a full Forte circuit that is going to get consumed whenever I do attacks to the enemy. And as I consume that Forte circuit, right, you're going to see that my number of Crimson Buds is going to increase as well, which is showing over here. When my Concerto is full, I'm able to cast a special move called Ephemeral, which consumes all my buds, gives me that damage buff, and then also deals a pretty good amount of damage.
It's getting fun.
And we'll just show you what a full bar consumption looks like. So I'm building up all of that resource, right? I'm in the budding state, and then when I outro skill out, that's what's going to happen. However, one thing you have to keep in mind when using this unit is that, well, your Concerto gain can have some problems unless you're doing a lot of dodges. Or you're going to cast your Resonance Liberation. And the end result is that Camellya kind of wants to use her Resonance Liberation on every single rotation to be able to actually generate that Concerto to do the budding state when you actually want to. That's going to be a breakdown of some of her combat mechanics and, you know, why there are certain requirements when it comes to her build. Now let's get into what you're typically going to want when you're building this unit. So when it comes to making a Camellya about as strong as possible and as easy to use as possible, what you're typically going to want to do is slot her at about 120% ER, as much crit rate and damage as possible, and as many attack subs as you can, preferably having something around, you know, 2.5 to 2.6k. You might be thinking this is a lot of attack, but that's because, well, Camellya, with her signature at least, is better with 1 attack 3 cost, 1 havoc damage 3 cost, 2 attack 1 costs, and of course, a crit damage 4 cost. One of the big things about her release and how things have changed since 1.4 is the fact that you, well, have a new Nightmare Echo called the Nightmare Crownless, which is going to give you a passive bonus of 12% havoc damage and 12% basic attack. This is really great. This is awesome, and this is sort of like the best in slot sort of lineup you can have for this unit, especially with all those passive bonuses. The thing is, when it comes to this unit and why an attack 3 cost is actually better, it's kind of simple. First and foremost, Camellya has 2 inherent skills that give her percentage damage bonuses right off the bat. She has this second one that gives her 15% basic, and we've covered how pretty much all of her damage is basic attack. Her forte is basic, her skills basic, her normal attack is basic, and of course, her Resonance Liberation is the only thing that's not basic. This is the only other damage type in her kit, liberation damage. So So this is doing a lot for her. She then has another inherent skill, her first one, that just gives her a 50% havoc damage bonus and then makes her heavy attacks deal basic attack damage. So this character has a lot of damage bonuses already built into their kit, and the end result is that an attack 3 cost ends up doing more for them overall relative to a second havoc damage one. That's only one part of it though. The other is the fact that, well, her signature gives a lot of basic attack damage. It gives you 30% just from using it and just from dealing basic attack damage. And then if the wielder consumes concerto energy, well, they gain a 40% basic attack damage bonus on top of this one. And that effect leaves when the wielder leaves the field. And Camellya is the only unit in the game that is able to use concerto energy without leaving the field. So the weapon is tailor-made for her, offers up to 70%, and that's another reason why you want to use 1 havoc, 1 attack. Camellya is really, really good with this weapon. She's exceptionally strong. You get amazing performance out of her, but she has another second best in slot option, which is actually Emerald of Genesis, the standard 5-star. And everybody should have a copy of this, especially at this point in the game. The number one recommendation most players can have is to use their UL45 box on either Emerald of Genesis or the 5-star pistol Static Mist. And what that means is that this is kind of like a high priority pull for pretty much every account. And the reason for that is its amazing base stats of 587 attack and 24.3% crit rate, and its big bonuses to attack whenever a resonance skill is used, and an increase to ER as well. One of the important things to keep in mind is that Camellya can easily use both stacks of this passive, and shockingly enough, this weapon has the same exact base stats as her signature. And so what this means is that if you're like a more value-oriented player, or you're not sure if you want to pull a 5-star limited weapon, you could just pull Camellya, slot her on EOG, and then just see how she works. You could just see how she works, because you're not going to have to like rebuild your character, use different echoes, use different forecasts like you would with other weapons, like if you're using Chang Li's, which has a different crit stat. You could just try her out on EOG, and if you want more damage, you could just go ahead and get her signature. You have options, and Emerald of Genesis, thankfully enough, is already a very, very good option on her. And so when it comes to weapon selection, Camellya is honestly one of the best 5-star limited units in the game, because the standard weapon works very, very well on her with great performance. We've covered all of the basic essentials of Camellya's kit. We've talked through, you know, how she works. We've done a bit of a crash course of her kit. Now let's talk about what her overall strength is as a whole. And that's going to require some more demonstrations. And we'll be doing a bit of a run through on the TOA, and we'll also be doing a run through with both of her weapon options and her 2 best supports. When it comes to the teams that we're going to be using, both in Whimpering Wastes and the TOA, the 2 teams that I'm going to be using will be Camellya, Shorekeeper, and Sanhua, as well as Camellya, Shorekeeper, and Roccia. We all know that Sanhua is going to be great for her because of, well, Sanhua's ability to buff basic attack damage and amplify it by 38%. And Roccia is going to be great for her because of her ability to buff havoc damage with an amplification of 20% and then basic attack by 25%, meaning that Rocia's buff is like 45% total amp, while Sanhua's is 38%. And we're going to talk about the differences between the two and why Sanhua is so damn good of a unit. And you might be perfectly fine with pulling Camellya and using her, even if you don't have her technical best in slot, Roccia. So with that, let's just go ahead and start off with the Sanhua team first in the TOA. We've already gotten a preview of it demoing her kit. Let's break it down and talk about why it's so damn good. So for this purpose, we're going to go up against the Mech Abomination. You might have seen me getting grabbed by him a couple of times. He is a bit of a villain. And we're just going to be putting Camellya in with her signature. We're going to be putting a Sanhua in with Moonlight Clouds and an Overture. So Sanhua's not doing a lot of damage over here, and Shorekeeper's just going to be able to provide her full buffs at 250 ER and the whole Rejuvenating Glow set. And then we got Camellya, of course, on Havoc Eclipse. With her Sig, we'll try her out on EOG as well, and this is what her stats are looking like. This is, in all honesty, a pretty high investment Camellya, and so don't take these clear times as sort of like a testament for how every single one is going to do, because I've invested a lot into her echoes, and hopefully it'll show. So this is our first initial run through. We're starting off with a Resonance skill, because that actually lets us start off our rotation with a big consumption of pistols. We just go over, we build up Concerto on both of our supporting units, go on to Sanhua, use the Impermanence Heron, and now we're on our Camellya. We do our skill to get back into White-Haired mode, and then cast our Liberation. And as you can see, it's a pretty fast one, right? I've consumed all my buds, and now I'm able to use Ephemeral I don't crit, though.
It's getting fun.
And I complete my rotation. I use skill, Nightmare Crownless, and then I leave the field by outroing out to Shorekeeper. And as you can see, even though I missed a couple of my crits, that did a lot of damage. And so we're just going to repeat another rotation again. Hopefully we don't miss crits this time.
Reborn from ancient roots. Don't run.
We have our Liberation up to cast it every rotation. And we're just going to be doing another rotation.
It's getting fun.
And then we cast Ephemeral, we crit, and we should just wipe this guy. He's completely cooked.
Let's have fun.
And we end with the Shorekeeper cinematic finish. And that's the clear. You can clearly see why Sanhua is so strong in this team. Because we all know that Camellya is a unit that has an exceptional amount of field time. I'm using Camellya for like 90% of the clear here. And with Sanhua being essentially an echo skill with how fast she's able to get into the field, do her combo, get all these buffs off, and then move over to intro to Camellya, it's pretty clear why Sanhua is good. Camellya is a very field time hungry character, and Sanhua has very low field time, which means that your overall team is strengthened by the fact that you're able to give Camellya much more time in your rotations. And she needs a lot because she basically kind of needs to do 2 full rotations. And so that clear time was great with Camellya's signature. We've already talked about Sanhua's strength. Now let's try it out using Emerald of Genesis, the more free-to-play option, as the alternative. And I think you'll be surprised at how well this team actually does. Let's get right on into it and do the same exact rotation that we were doing before.
Frozen blockade. Astral modulation. Load.
Stay behind me.
Bloom from ashen shadow. Don't run. Keep the dance.
I do those 2 skills at the start to also activate EOG's passive, which gives you extra attack if you use a resonance skill.
Grafting. Suffer.
And as you can see, this damage is pretty damn good.
Chaos. Let's have fun. Vow from the
It's
soul.
pretty damn good. And this is the free-to-play option, ladies and gentlemen.
Like
Everybody can get this.
Iron graft you knew. Loading.
Stay behind me.
Sprout of budding seed. Feed my blossoms. Self-deceivers.
My Liberation's actually dealing more damage.
Crimson blossom.
And we don't crit there, unfortunately. We don't crit on Ephemeral, unfortunately, so we might not be able to get the 2 rotation clear. Hey, but it happens. It happens. We didn't crit. We're gonna have to do another fast rotation, but it's not a big deal, right? We still have a minute left to get 3 stars in the TOA.
Loading.
Yeah, whatever.
Ancient roots. Struggle harder. Entertain me.
And you can kind of see how that all worked out. We missed on Ephemeral, otherwise we would have 2 rotated it, but that's kind of like it. You can clearly see the EOG clear time was slower. Of course, we're not using her signature, but it's still extremely competitive, and it's still extremely good, and we're doing it, remember, with a 4-star unit. And so now, it's time for us to run a couple of comparisons, because we've got to do something else, ladies and gentlemen. We've got to do something else. We've got to try her with Roccia's. Let's put Camellya back on her signature, and then use her with a Roccia, who is going to be pretty well invested. Roccia, unfortunately, won't have her signature, but would be putting her on Verity's handle, with a bunch of stats that look like this. She's going to do a lot more damage than Sanhua. She's also going to be on Midnight Veil, the new Havoc sub DPS set, along with the Impermanence Heron. So she's going to be doing quite a fair amount of sub DPS damage. And we're going to see what the comparison is like to that Sanhua team, knowing that we kind of have like the premium buffing option over here. Let's give it a spin. So we're just starting off the rotation as typically as possible. Except this time, we're not going to be swapping over to Roccia to do anything crazy. She's just going to come in, use her attack, and then do her 3 bounces. Use her Liberation after the 3rd bounce. And now just play the rotation typically.
It's getting fun.
We activate Ephemeral, and we're doing a ton of damage.
Let's have fun.
And you can see over here, that did a lot of damage in a single rotation.
Can't lose the red.
That did a lot of damage with just one rotation.
Loaded. Aerial stun. Tornado nuclear. Mamma mia. Avanti. Unexpected plot twist.
We don't get the third bounce off, but it's fine. We have a full concerto bar.
Reborn from ancient ruins. Don't run.
And we can just run it back.
Keep the dance going.
And we should just be able to finish this off with an ephemeral over here.
Vitality sour.
You can kind of see I missed a couple of hits. I got hit a couple of times. And the end result was that, unfortunately, simply due to the fact that the boss doesn't have that much HP, this was actually slower than the Sanhua team. That's because the Sanhua team was able to get into the second rotation faster, but this team's rotations do a lot more damage. But that's kind of like the differentiation between the two, right? Roccia takes a lot more field time, a lot more commitment on her actions to actually get to Camellya, while Sanhua's a lot faster. Against bosses that have more HP, this Mech Abomination doesn't have a lot. Roccia will typically, with her more damaging rotations, probably get you better results, but with Sanhua, against lower HP enemies, she's actually going to be better in a lot of cases. And so that's really like a bit of like the comparison between the two at a baseline. You can imagine that with EOG, because we've already tested with Sanhua, EOG Camellya with Roccia is going to do just fine as well. So I don't think we really need to dive into that for now. You can already see that Camellya has some great free-to-play options, and she also has a premium option. And they both work out very well in the TOA, but do keep in mind that Roccia is a lot more expensive to use and get good results with. If you're not reaching at least 70% crit with Roccia in combat, you're not going to be able to access Rocia's buff of about 200 points to attack that she gives whenever she uses her liberation. So it is going to be a little bit rough. Both teams will have to do 3 rotations on the Thundering Mephis. Let's test that out.
I engraft you new. Aerial stun. Mamma mia. Avanti. Figure out. Time for some.
We dodged it there, ladies and gentlemen.
I will reborn from ancient ruins. Don't run. Keep the dance going.
We hit all of those bounces there. We're good.
Crimson blossom. Let's have
No, this is the 2 rotation team.
the soul. In war with time. Loading. Aerial stun. Tempest show. Mamma mia. Avanti. Big improv. Performance. Bloom from ashen chef. Feed my blossoms. Self-deceivers. Vitality sour. Let's have ordained.
It's a 2 rotation team. One last thing that I want to show you all when it comes to Camellya is a bit of a different tech when it comes to her rotations. For the sake of this overview, I'm actually going to do this team with Sanhua because she's typically easier to run this double intro rotation with. Let me just show you all exactly what I'm talking about here. So Camellya has an interesting tech where she can eat an intro skill on your team. The first intro skill, where I'm typically going from Shorekeeper to Sanhua, introing onto Sanhua, and then introing on Camellya. You can instead do a rotation where you start on Shorekeeper, you intro onto Camellya, and you build up your buds and consume your pistols, and then you intro skill, and then you swap to Sanhua without using an intro skill, top off her concerto, and then go back to Camellya to use ephemeral, enter the budding state, and have all of your different buffs active. So let's show a little bit about what that looks like. We're just going to start off with a pretty typical looking rotation over here with this team. Except we're just going to stay
In war with time.
and keep Sanhua on standby.
Sprout of budding seeds.
And we're just going to go over here and then build up all of our buds. Then go over to Sanhua, and then back onto Camellya. Use our ephemeral. And now we have the budding state active, along with all of Sanhua's outro skill buffs. And the end result is, boy oh boy, that's quite a bit of damage.
Oh, from the heart.
That is quite a bit of damage.
Stay calm.
And Sanhua makes it very easy because she generates, of course, right, a lot of fucking concerto.
Loading.
Stay behind me.
Ah, shit.
Leave it to me.
We kind of messed it up over there, but you get the message. You get the message from that initial rotation that I showed. You go onto Camellya, you build up the buds, and then you go onto Sanhua with a regular swap, top off her concerto, then go back onto Camellya to ephemeral, use your liberation, and then of course, right, follow up with all of those super buffed attacks. And that is a separate rotation that you can do. It is a different way of playing the unit. The damage numbers are relatively similar between the two rotation options, and I would just recommend you go with the one that you feel is the most comfortable to play for you. One thing to keep in mind though is that because ephemeral is tied to your concerto energy, you don't actually want to dodge too much if you're doing a double intro rotation, because you could end up in a circumstance where you accidentally use Camellya's outro skill when you actually want to save up that concerto to be able to use ephemeral. And so there are some downsides to doing that double intro rotation, but do keep in mind that it is an option if you're against an enemy, right, like the Mech Abomination, where it has really long attack times and you don't need to dodge that often. But in AoE based content, it could be a little bit rough because there might be a lot of enemies attacking you and you might feel the need to dodge to avoid getting chain hits. With this character and with those TOA runs, you probably noticed that I was only using her normal basic attack. And that's because she has, like I mentioned before, the way better tracking and something a lot of people don't realize, absolutely disgusting ratios on her dodge counter. This dodge counter basically deals 300% damage. Her dodge counter in her white-haired form deals 300% damage. And when you're against a single target boss, not in an AoE situation where you're not getting attacked that often, when you're against a single target boss and sometimes you have to dodge those attacks, being able to spam this move, consume a shit ton of pistols, and then also generate all those buds is absolutely insane. And you can kind of see over here, right, that Camellya's Vine dodge counter, which is Atonement, this move over here, dodge counter Atonement, her dodge counter in her Vine form only deals about 226. So that's 226 on her red form's dodge counters, but then her white form deals 300%. So that's kind of like the strategical difference between the two. That's why white-haired form is so much better against single target bosses and enemies, while red-haired form is a lot better against AoE and waves of enemies. And so you've only seen white hair. Let's talk a little bit about red hair. Now that we've had an opportunity to look at Camellya in the TOA, now let's take a look at what she does in Whimpering Waste. The team that I'm going to be using for this demo is pretty simple. It's going to be the same exact one that we used in the TOA. If you swap in Verena for pretty much all of these teams, you're going to be critting way less consistently, doing a bit less damage, but having faster overall team rotations. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll use the same exact Camellya, Shorekeeper, and Sanhua team. We won't be using Roccia because she's a little bit busted in this game mode with all the grouping that she provides. And we'll just be throwing like a dummy team in on the second half. It doesn't particularly matter. My recommendation when it comes to using Camellya is to actually have her on the side that starts you off with all of your concerto energy. The reason why she's so good with this is that she could immediately just throw an unbuffed ephemeral right in the fucking face of the enemies. And when it comes to the best token that she has available to use, at least in this update, I would say definitely use the Revelry that unveils mysteries. This gives you a 55% damage amp if you ever do damage while you're in the air. And guess what, guys? Camellya will be in the air a lot when it comes to this game mode because she's going to be using Blossom mode pretty much exclusively. To start Camellya off, you're basically going to do something really simple. You're going to start off on your support, Shorekeeper. Use her concerto. Go to Sanhua. Use your skill. And then go onto Camellya. And then use ephemeral. And then you're just going to enter your Blossom mode. And then you're going to, well, spin. And then once you're fully stacked up, you're going to go back onto Shorekeeper, right? And then do an actual rotation with your team. And you should have all of your liberations up to kind of like do those same exact rotations that we were talking about in the TOA. So that's done. And now we're just shitting out damage like crazy. because we're getting all the amp that we need.
Crimson.
Throw out an ephemeral, just completely nuke a wave immediately, and then just melt a bunch of elites. Make sure that you're adjusting your positioning with the dodge to hit as many enemies as possible, and then just kind of like exit out the field when your outro skill is ready, and then just rotate through your team again.
Iron graft.
This character is incredibly easy to use in this game mode. You get great results out of her. And with San Juan Overture, you're going to have a really low field time. And unfortunately, I'm running into some issues with the mob over here.
Keep the dance going.
But typically, one run on this unit will be enough to clear it 99% of the time, unless you get some really awful enemy AI. But it isn't too bad over here, right? We just cast Ephemeral, we blow up an entire server, and we only have, like, you know, like an enemy or two left over.
Let's have ordained.
Lotus pervade.
In war with time.
And now we're just going.
Stay behind me. A chain.
Bloom from ashen shell. Struggle harder. Entertain me.
And you can see that the score is a little bit diabolical here.
Let's have fun. Crimson blossom.
Unfortunately, these Vitrium dancers are a bit of a pain in the ass, but you can kind of see almost 4K. Almost 4K. And this is just like a first try. I wasn't putting too much effort into it. I was kind of just like, you know, literally the first try of the day. And we almost hit 4K. And remember, we're using the free-to-play option. And we're going pretty crazy. That's going to be Camellya's performance with her signature. Now, of course, we've got to try it out with Emerald to Genesis, the free-to-play option, in Whimpering Waste. And we'll see what some of the score differentials are. And we're not going to be doing a super sweaty playstyle. We're just going to be doing the exact same stuff that we did before.
Loading.
Stay behind me. A change of perspective.
Sprout of budding seeds. Let's have fun. Leave it to me. Yay.
Lotus pervade.
Astral modulation. Loading.
Stay behind me.
Oh, dear. We even messed up here, too. Yeah, that was a bit of a misplay. We might have to reset this run. I kind of fucked up on San Juan over there. So you can kind of see the damage isn't nearly as high, but we're still able to basically just one-shot these waves, especially with moves like Ephemeral. We do have a bit of an issue with some of our attacks over here, but it's not like a huge one at all.
Oath from the heart.
And shackles be gone.
Iron graft renew.
Stay behind me.
Reborn from ancient. Don't run. Keep the dance.
There we go. Unfortunately, we do miss a crit over there, so we are missing a lot of our potential damage output.
Vitality sower.
But the scores are still very, very good for like a free-to-play team. Or, you know, like a free-to-play weapon, not necessarily a free-to-play team. And it'll get you the clears that you need to do. And this is with, arguably, a lot more mistakes and a lot more misplays than what I was doing before.
Loading.
Stay behind me.
Sprout of budding seeds. Struggle hard.
A lot more misplays than what I was doing before.
Grafting suffer.
So yeah, we're still hitting about 3K. We're still hitting about 3K. I made a bunch of misplays, and I could definitely get to like 3.5 if I'm trying a little bit harder, sweating some of the spawns, doing all of that. But guess what, guys? If you're getting 3K on this side and you want the full rewards from WiWa, guess what you need on the other side? 1.5K, because you need 4.5 total. And if she's pumping out numbers like this with misplays and using Emerald of Genesis, the free-to-play option, well, the unit is pretty damn good. And there's a reason why she's tier 0 in WiWa. So that'll be that. Those are the gameplay overviews. I do know that I'm using Shorekeeper in all of these teams, but that is to make up for that Camellya weakness of the critical rate. And do keep in mind that if you don't have Shorekeeper and you're using her with a different sort of support, you are going to potentially have some issues. You are going to have some issues landing those crits and being consistent. And so it is kind of like a bit of a destined pairing between these two characters, unless you're willing to sacrifice your Camellya's damage output by slotting her on like a crit rate forecast. And you're perfectly fine to do that. Just know that you will not get results like this. When you want to think about her overall pull value relative to other 5 stars on the roster, there's a pretty simple argument to make for Camellya. And that argument is, if you already have another unit that deals a specific damage type, you might not feel a lot of value out of pulling another one. And when it comes to Havoc, which is Camellya's attribute, well, everybody already has a Havoc damage dealer that's pretty good, because everyone has access to S6 Havoc Rover. And if you already have this unit built and you're already getting good results out of them because they do have a lot of great benefits, especially at S6, then you might not think that Camellya is the most highest value pull ever. However, if you are using, let's just say, Spectral Rover with a character like Phoebe, or you're trying to use Arrow Rover with some of the upcoming new units, or, you know, an existing team like Gian, then you can't really use the Havoc one at the same time. And so, in a lot of ways, because Spectral Rover is Phoebe, another limited character's best in slot, you could just pull Camellya for Havoc coverage. Way easier to use gameplay and way stronger gameplay compared to Havoc Rover. And then pull that, round out the Havoc element, and then reserve the MC for other units. And so, regardless of where you go and what you do, Camellya is going to be high value, but her value changes and actually gets higher the more limited units you have on your account. If you have Phoebe, Camellya's value grows exponentially as a unit. And this might be a situation that a lot of players are in if they started in version 2.0. That's going to be our final overview of this unit. Let me know what you all think. Peace.